Our next speaker was here last year, and he talked about Reggie, and he made the case with slides, facts, and figures that Reggie was costing us hundreds of millions of dollars a year and resulting in an increase in carbon emissions. Since that point in time, since that message was put forth, many people have questioned our participation in Reggie, and one of our gubernatorial candidates has pledged to withdraw us from Reggie. So when you have the right facts and figures and you present them well, they resonate. So I'm proud to welcome Jason Lemme here again this year, and this year he's going to talk about what's really in your utility bill. Jason.
Okay. Morning, everyone. I hope you stick around just for a little bit longer because I promise there'll be some good detail in this presentation. First, I want to thank Ray for inviting me again to speak on on the Reggie topic, but also on the power bills in general. And I also have to say that it is quite scary that the last time I was in this ballroom was at my fraternity's senior spring ball 28 years ago. Not much has changed. So this process of trying to figure out what's in your bill is actually not that easy. It is trying to, as a friend of mine has said, separating the mac from the cheese. So we did our best to kind of go through the documents, break it all down, and try to explain it in a pretty straightforward way. And just by way of introduction also, it says here, I'm at Hartree Partners. You don't know what that is. We are a US-owned, US-based global commodity trading firm. We are in the gas space, the power space, corn, cocoa, coffee, copper, LNG, you name it. We are involved in moving, storing, processing commodities from where they're produced to where they're consumed. We own the Newark Energy Center, right by the airport, 705 megawatt CCGT, the most efficient gas power plant in the state. We also own, through JVs, we own and we've been developing 5 gigawatts of solar and battery facilities on both sides of the Atlantic, just to give you a sense of what we do in the gas and power space. Okay, great. So I want to start breaking down what's in your bill, okay? And really what I want to focus on this slide is the third bit, right? The utility delivery charge. The first two buckets I'll get to. But basically in your bill you have the cost of energy, you have the capacity cost, which I'll get to, you have regulatory costs. I'm going to talk about 7 programs, or this presentation has 7 programs in that portion of the bill. And then right now I'm going to get to the utility delivery cost. So if you think about what the utilities portion of the bill is, it's a formula. It's been around for 100 years. It is highly scrutinized by the Utility Commission of every state. And the formula kind of goes like this. Total revenue equals total cost. Total cost is your operating expenses, your accrued depreciation, taxes that have to be paid, and ultimately, what remains is the undepreciated value cost of the mass of, think about all the wires, transmissions, substations, whatever else it is, and that's called your rate base. And what happens is the Utility Commission allows a rate of return to be applied to that rate base. And that rate of return resembles roughly the weighted average cost of capital for the utility, because the assumption is if they have to replace the rate base, they're going to have to access the capital markets, debt or equity, some combination of the two. And so this, in my mind, and I don't work for a utility, but this to me has worked for a century because it is the most cost-effective and expeditious way and transparent way to deliver energy through the wires that feed our homes, businesses, whatnot. Okay, so that is the least exciting part of this presentation. Okay, so now the part I just talked about, the utility delivery charge, is the gray mass that you see that used to be 39% of the bill, now it says 37% of the bill, right? And we're talking about energy years 23 and 26, right? So that'd be the year ending May 31st, 2026, okay? Now you can see that the mass of 37%, what I did not include in here is that about 1/5 of it, about 20% of that, is also comprised of surcharges and riders that are mandated by the state for the utility to collect and then pass on to whatever program it's supporting. And I've listed some of those programs. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see them there. We've heard a lot about the capacity market. The capacity market, what is this? This is a payment that power generators receive in PJM. The obligation for receiving a capacity payment is that you have to show up every day with an offer in the market, and when there's an emergency, you have to show up as demanded. If you do those things, you get to keep the payment. If you do not do those things, you get penalized up to 150% of that payment. When we talk about what's been changing in the capacity market, that payment has gone up from energy year 23 to energy year 26 from $98 to $269. Now, those auctions actually took place about 5 years apart. They're not 3 years apart. And normally you do things 3 years in advance. What I want to talk about on the capacity market, just to mention, is when that 2023 auction took place in 2020, we had 19 gigawatts more thermal generation in PJM. We had 3 gigawatts less renewable generation in PJM. I'm not even talking about demand growth. But if what capacity is meant to do is solve for that emergency event, that reliability event, is it any wonder that when supply goes down on something, and demand, let's just say for a moment, stays still, is it any wonder that the cost of that reliability has gone up? And when you're adding less reliable resources to the grid, you may assume it has some sort of benefit on the energy side, that it offers power at a lower price. I don't know. It depends if it shows up or not. But ultimately, when you're solving for the most reliable hour of the year to award those capacity payments, is it any wonder that the cost has gone up? That part of the bill, you can see, has gone from 6% to 13% of your bill. When people talk about PJM, 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 that is the orange slug you see there. Now you can see the other big part there is energy, right? Energy is simply the cost of providing power on a daily, a real-time basis, or in the what we call basic generation service auction that happens several times a year to supply the utility-based generation. Think of it as, I'd like to think there's something you could do about that, but you're talking about the cost of gas, the cost of power, the cost of nuclear. You're talking about all the costs of providing energy that every state, every country has to deal with. In other words, it's an area we really can't do much about from a policy standpoint, right? I take it as a given. The one thing I will say, though, and I don't have it here, but in 2022, the energy price skyrocketed because of the war in Ukraine, because of supply chain issues, whatever it is, right? The price was, I think, over double what it was today. And yet, our bill is basically higher than it was then. And so that goes into the next slug here, and that's the regulatory adders. So if you think of the bill as, at this point, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, the other 1/3 is going to be the capacity plus the regulatory adders that go into this. And those regulatory adders on their own are up 45% in the last 3 years. RGGI, which I'll get to, is up about 400%, I want to say, in the last 5 years. Okay. So I pulled my bill here from JCPL, and I wanted to sort of explain now what goes into this mess. And actually, I only have a few line items. the first thing I want to point out is if you see the fourth line, which my eyes are not very good, you're not going to be able to see it that well. But that fourth line item is the gray mass from the prior page. It's the delivery service charge plus some of those pass-throughs I talked about, right? Again, we talked about how that is derived. We can't do much about that. Now let's focus on what's called the basic generation service. We call it BGS, right? This is the part that gets auctioned off, and then there are some things that come in annually into this. And I break it out in the pie chart here to give you a sense of what comprises that BGS service, okay? Again, we talked about energy. That was a third of the total bill. It's about half of the BGS service. The other half I want to go through, we talked about capacity. I don't want to spend too much more time on that. I do want to talk about, in the table below, what this adds up to, right? And you can see it's not insignificant, right? You're talking about a bill that's in the, almost $10 billion sort of range. So I want to go through some of these programs, and I want to sort of say, is it good for New Jersey or not? So the first one I want to talk about is the one in the middle, the NJSREC program. The SREC program, essentially, I'm going to summarize a lot of these things, so if you really know the detail of them, forgive me. But essentially, this has helped fund a lot of the behind-the-meter solar within New Jersey over the last 15 years or so. So if you think about it, this money, $630 million we estimate, has funded and provides a return to this investment. Is the investment in New Jersey? Yes. Is it satisfying a policy goal? Probably. Could we argue about whether it's worth it or not? Sure, of course. I'm not here to judge that, right? I will say the SRECs will be stepping down steadily, about $100 million per year for a few years over time. So am I going to spend a lot of breath on that? No. The Class 1 program is a program that requires us to pay for a renewable energy credit for a % of our consumption. That credit has to be acquired from the marketplace for renewable energy credits. Those credits get generated by generators in other states primarily, over 85%, right? And there's no additionality required there. So if you had built a wind farm in Illinois and Indiana, who are generally the beneficiaries of these programs, you get to enjoy selling these RECs to New Jersey residents every year, okay? This program, as you can see, is almost $700 million. Does it satisfy a policy goal? Maybe, I'm not sure. Does it increase the amount of generation out there? I'm not sure. Remember, there's no additionality clause, which means it could be on existing generation where the money has already been spent. And is the money spent in New Jersey? Well, unequivocally, no, right? So is it a good investment for New Jersey? Not so sure. Now, you could argue that those two programs maybe reduce carbon emissions. They probably do to some extent. We can argue about whether it's worth the investment. But then we have another program that largely offsets the carbon savings from those two programs. So essentially, we have assessed ourselves a cost with a policy goal on one side, and then we've assessed ourselves a cost on the other side to wipe away the carbon savings of that and bill ourselves for it in the process. And how does this work? Well, I thought about this. Think about my daughter setting up a lemonade stand in Lambertville and her friend setting one up in New Hope, 200 feet apart. And my daughter sells lemonade for 95 cents and her friend sells it for $1. Good business for her. Again, we have the most efficient gas plant in New Jersey. We can sell power cheaper. But now I levy a 100% tax on her, right? On my daughter. So now she's got to sell lemonade at a higher price. Where do you think the business is going to go? 200 feet over. It's a commodity product, right? This is essentially what the RGGI program has done. We don't live on an island. We are competing with other markets. And what happens is, when you subsidize out-of-state generation, you are subsidizing very inefficient gas plants and coal plants. And I know Matt yesterday from AlphaGen said that his study had shown that it increased emissions 2.7 million tons by having the program, the RGGI program. Our analysis, because of the way some people do their work, shows that that is actually closer to 4 million tons, essentially wiping out the benefits of the other programs. Okay, let me move along here. Right, so now let's talk about what's going to go on in the future. I want to talk about demand. Everyone's been talking about demand growth. We have yet to see the inflection in demand growth from AI. That's scary, right? The demand growth we have seen in PJM, and particularly in New Jersey, has come from electrification. It's come from data centers, but data centers to really support, again, my daughter's Instagram habit, right? It's for like photo storage and things like that. It is not for AI yet, the highly energy intensive usage. We have yet to see that demand growth. Many of these programs do not do well in a demand growing environment. They were conceived in a demand sideways or demand declining environment, a cornucopia. But now we have demand growth. So when you have a mandate from RGGI to lower emissions in a market that has no coal left, where your gas plants are already running at half of what they were 3 years ago, even though they're more efficient than across the river, what are you going to cut? The price of RGGIs are going to spike. Why do I know they're going to spike? Because there's not a single guardrail in place for it. There's no price cap, there's no speculative limit, there's no holding limits. It could go to $40 tomorrow. It's a small market. It is speculated on by funds from all over the world. Capacity. Capacity issues are not going to go away for the moment. Remember, I talked about demand growth. We have yet to see the inflection. I know some people like to dismiss the demand growth estimates from PJM. They are organic. They come from their requisite utilities and get added up. This past summer, PJM had expected the tightest hour to be 154 megawatts. It was 160 megawatts. Gigawatts, I'm sorry. That's the wrong number there. The point is, demand is growing, and we have yet to see the inflection. And we're not solving anymore for that 7 p.m. hour, right? If you think about the grid, and you think about a lot of the solar and battery development, which is wonderful, it is really designed to solve the 7 p.m. hour in August, right? You store solar energy all day, you unleash it for those 2 hours in the evening when demand ramps up, and you smooth out everything, the duck curve, you smooth out everything. What do you do when it's 7 a.m., MLK weekend in January, and it's dark? That is what we have to solve now, because if you look in the last 3 years, and you look at every ISO around the country, and you look at the dearest day, the top 5 in the last few years, of the top 5 days, tightest days, 3 of them could be in the winter. That's scary. That's the electrification coming in, right? If you're now heating with electricity, you're still charging your car, and your behind the meter solar is not humming like it does in the summer, that winter hour is going to get very tight. That's the capacity solver. And that's what I mean by seasonality here. And if your demand-linked programs don't get fixed, the costs of those are going to go up over time. I rushed through a lot of this stuff. I'm happy to take questions now. I know we're on a tight timeline. I will be here also afterwards, so I'm be right over here or outside, and you can come to me and debate me or whatever, or have any questions, but I'm all ears. Do we have time for questions, Ray? Yeah. Okay, great. And like Jack said, I can't see anything, so if you get the mic.
Good morning. Scott Needham, Princeton Air Conditioning. I may have missed it, but where do the societal benefit charges flow into? What bucket? And how do they get used?
So I don't know how they get used. They are in the gray bucket. So if you think about, and what we did is we tried to separate things out from the buckets. So for instance, RGGIs are actually captured in the clearing price of energy, but we can separate them out knowing what the marginal power plant was, and then we can segregate, well, what was the Reggie adder that day? So we can kind of deconstruct it. We did the same thing for the SBCs, but they would wind up in the delivery charge on your bill.
A question over here.
Okay.
Yeah, when I look at my electric bill, the basic generation charge is about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Now,
Sounds low, but keep going.
so I know that's made up of energy and capacity, which is wholesale, which is about 5 or 6 cents. Where's the other 5 cents coming from?
Right, so that's this bit right here. So you see half, well, I mean, it's almost exactly half, right? So if you see the energy is about half, that's the part you just described. It's about $40 to $50 per megawatt hour, right? And if you look on the left half, it's all those programs and the capacity payment that go into the rest of it. Any other questions? Okay, like I said, I'll be outside if you have any. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me again.